business and pyramid schemes, so just off of recent events. Remember that at any point, if you do have your questions, you do have comments, you can call us 457-9997 to do so. Miss Sandy, good morning to you.
All right, your mic is muted, Miss Sandy.
Good morning.
Morning, and how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
All right, and thank you for bearing with us. We're sorting out a few things behind the scene this morning.
Totally understandable.
Okay. All right, so we are going to be conducting this interview with Ms. Letitia Sandy, Director of the Financial Intelligence Unit. And as we hinted at this morning, and in relation to a conversation that we had last week, this interview stems from Creators Alliance and all the conversations that have resulted as a consequence of that quote unquote company. All right. So Miss Sandy, let us know what are LMMs, which are multi-level. What's it again?
Marketing.
It's marketing.
Multi-level marketing.
Marketing and such pyramid schemes. What are those actually? And how does Creators Alliance actually fit into the definition of either the LMMs or the pyramid schemes?
Okay, well, the thing is, in a lot of instances, many of the things that are exploited for illicit activity do have some legitimacy. There are models where they can operate legitimately. So in the multi-level marketing, you have participants, they earn money by selling products and recruiting others to join their sales network. And in the legitimate MLMs, you have a focus on your products. So you do have some that are in fact legitimate. But in those that operate illegally as the pyramid scheme, it depends primarily on recruiting others. So it's a case where in order for you to get, you have to bring in other people. And we tend to see that is what happens. So these investment, the persons who really get the returns are the ones who came in earlier. So in order to get anything, you use the money that come in from those later down the line to pay out those persons who came in earlier. So you have this false appearance that there is some return on your investment, that you really are getting money, when in fact it's just a case of moving money around from other people. And, ultimately what happens is you can't keep recruiting people forever. And if you're just moving around a finite amount of money because there's really no gain on it, it eventually dries up when you run out of people to shuffle that money around, or people become wise enough that they stop putting money in. So there's always that inevitable collapse and that's when the fallout comes. And that's unfortunately is where everything comes out, because people are putting in the money, they're getting something back. And it's not until, you try to reach the people who are in charge of these schemes, these entities, that you realize that something is amiss.
Okay, so I know that in the past we've been exposed to different companies. I don't want to call them in particular, right? Their names on here. But we noted that they tend to recruit persons, but they're actually selling a product. So how can we be a little bit more mindful with regards to these companies that recruit persons, but they're saying, okay, so they walk around with a catalog of items, etc., stating, okay, so this is available, etc. But the more persons you recruit, I think the higher up the level you go. So what is the difference between this and the Creators Alliance, as an example?
Yes. Well, I think one of the starting point is the fact that we live in an age where we have so much access to information, but we tend to use it only when it suits us, or we don't take full advantage of it, because we can verify if these various companies and businesses are legitimate. Because I said there are some business models that do have some legitimacy. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, these entities would be regulated by the Financial Services Authority. So in some instances, a quick Google search on a company that is asking you to do these investments would return if, for example, they have been subject to any sort of suspicion or any criminal charges in another jurisdiction. The Financial Services Authority, you can verify with them if they have in fact been registered to conduct the business that they indicate that they're conducting. So I think the first step is some level of due diligence, because of course the better people get at detecting and realizing that something may be amiss, the better they get at giving that appearance of legitimacy. And we can't be fooled by someone having a website or coming with a brochure. Those things are very easy to have. Getting more information on the business, okay, so what is the structure? How is it dependent upon me being paid? I mean, if you are legitimate, those are questions that you should be able to provide answers to. And the case is that I'm not sure how deeply we probe, because as I said, in these instances, depending on what you're told, 9 times out of 10, you get money by bringing other people in. So there isn't a situation where you're told that, we sell and we make profits, or we're required to have a certain amount of money in a bank account to ensure that we're able to meet payments on a regular basis. So you're not provided with that security that a legitimate entity may have, and everything is a little bit touch and go, here today, not here tomorrow. So I think if you ask the relevant questions and you're not told that there is that protection built in to ensure that even if, let's say, normal market circumstances means that the entity perhaps has an issue, how do they have money in their reserves to pay you? And if it's this sort of, if it's so dependent on who comes and who goes, I think that really should raise a red flag for us that there really is no security. And it's a matter of getting in and getting out quickly and hoping that you're one of them who gets money in the early part of these various schemes.
Okay.
All right. All right. Now, what role does the FIU play in all of this? In cases like this one that just happened, and even others before,
Mhm.
maybe in the future. Hopefully not.
Okay. Well, the thing is, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you would have a multi-pronged approach. As I said, you have the Financial Services Authority, who is responsible for registration, licensing. You have the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. They're responsible for investigating all offenses. Now, where the FIU comes in is that any offense in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, regionally, internationally, if there is a financial benefit from you committing an offense, the FIU now, where we investigate those offenses, because they also become what you call predicate offenses for money laundering. Any offense from which you derive a financial benefit can be a predicate offense, or an offense upon which you can base a money laundering charge. So the FIU one, we would investigate with our counterparts regionally and internationally, because, for example, pyramid schemes and the like are actually prohibited under legislation, because there was that upsurge in these offenses, especially around COVID, when you had the pyramid schemes, the various forms of susus. There was an amendment to our Consumer Protection Act, which actually made these offenses criminal, which made these acts, criminal. So because that is an offense under the legislation, you have issues of fraud as well. The FIU is activated to conduct various investigations, be it on if we have the names of persons who were involved in these various schemes, if they are bank accounts. So following the money, following that paper trail, and doing the financial investigation in conjunction with the police, who may be investigating the main offense. So if it's the fraud or the fact that these are offenses under the Consumer Protection Act. So we would be working in parallel alongside the investigation of the main offense in these types of matters.
All right. So question. We note what is being said from persons who engaged in a Creators Alliance. So we're just going to be using that one as the example, given that it's the most recent situation to unfold here. In terms of persons who, in a sense, should have known better and being involved in this activity. And I suppose persons of a particular social and economic standing in SVG who sort of made it seem like, yes, it was okay for us or for you to be able to recruit persons. What would you say to so I know that you said persons could do their research, etc. But you know what tends to happen is that if a particular lawyer comes to me and says that, this is a show deal, etc., you should sign up, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What should me as the regular person look out for?
Well, as I said, those types of red flags, if it's a case that you have, I mean, we're beautiful people, we're amazing people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but the hard sell sometimes from persons to get us involved, sometimes that's a red flag. That hard sell where somebody is coming at you from a position of, yes, I benefited and I want you to benefit so much. And it's that repeat action, right? That is always one of the modus operandi in these schemes. You have to bring people in. And yes, there are people who are of, respectable persons, but I am trained as an attorney. My area of specialization is in financial crime. If I have another matter, even in the legal realm, I am going to go to an attorney who specializes in that area, right? And I say that because, yes, somebody may be reputable, but are they the authority in this regard? And as I said, you have the Financial Services Authority, you have the Financial Intelligence Unit. We publish articles. The FSA is now on Instagram. So we're trying so hard to reach the public. And I would say that these are the types of entities that can verify if something is legitimate. It's just a phone call, it's just an email. And if it's not, it's always trust but verified. So yes, someone may be telling you that this is legitimate. You say, okay, and then you just do your due diligence. You just make a telephone call. You verify if this is registered. And if you have some one of these entities, verify, as I said, if they have been subject to illicit activity. The unfortunate thing is that in these instances, there's nothing really groundbreaking that we as regulators can tell you. It always comes back to, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Because I appreciate that we live in an age where there is a lot of diversity and innovation. I appreciate that. But you have to remember that where that innovation and diversity lives, it makes it easier for criminal elements to also take advantage of it. So the line often becomes blurred. So it requires more due diligence of us to verify if this is the legitimate innovation or this is a bad actor taking advantage of it. Because it's the same thing that happens. We have natural disasters. You have people who set up fake funding schemes to take advantage of people sending money during earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. So you have to be mindful that this is what is the modus operandi. We get emails from our banking institutions about phishing emails. These things are on the rise. We are in the realm of more of these sort of digital cyber crimes, more of these crimes that have a lot more of an air of legitimacy, and it requires you to do your due diligence. We're heading into the carnival season. Anyone who's buying a costume, I'm sure you've asked your friends which section you like. You're going to verify who has the most food on the road, who has the most drinks, who treats you the best. So we do that level of due diligence in our everyday life. Why do we not extend it to something where we are going to be spending money? We risk losing money, especially in a situation where we know that these things happen repeatedly. So I think the fact that it happens so much should make us even a little bit more skeptical and want to do some due diligence, because it's not that these are one-off. We're seeing them happen time and time again, right? So I think it is incumbent upon us to do our due diligence. We have the financial institutions, the banks, the money remitters. many times these persons highlight to people that they may be victims of scams, you know, but we often think people don't want to see us prosper. They don't want what's good for us. And it's really, really unfortunate. No matter how much education you do, if that is the mindset, it is very difficult for someone to combat from a professional standpoint. So I think the only thing that we can stress time and time again, ask the questions, do your due diligence. And doing your due diligence is not going to take much out of you. It is very simple to verify the legitimacy of some of these things. And realistically, something that offers you so much for doing so little, I think should encourage you to probably probe a little bit deeper.
All right. Another question. What role do you think the financial sector, as in the financial institutions, may have played in a sense of this situation happening for as long as it did, right? The reason why I'm asking is that generally bank accounts, you have to disclose what your source of funds is. And for many persons, from an article that we read last week, it said about 15,000 Vincentians were affected by it. Now, if that figure indeed is correct, there are some persons whose bank accounts would have reflected significant increases. Now, do you think that maybe the financial institutions sort of lapsed in a sense in terms of maybe their reporting, or was it a case where they could only report, but there wasn't maybe enough to proceed at the time that they may have seen certain red flags happening with some accounts?
Okay. Well, of course, in all of this, it's a case where you operate from a situation where we do not yet have all the full facts. We do not know everything that is involved in it. But I will say that one of the things that instances such as this do highlight is one, the need for stronger multi-jurisdictional cooperation, because we did see that this was something that happened across multiple jurisdictions, and the strengthening of the public-private partnership, as you alluded to, because the thing is, as regulators, as you know, the FIU, there is certain information that resides with the financial institutions. And while they may provide information, the issue is, I think, the timeliness of it, and us as a whole adapting our thinking as it relates to how illicit activity may occur. That it requires an understanding that, as I said, the bad actors are moving into this space. So it may require greater scrutiny. It may require perhaps issuing your own advisories to your customers, right? Letting them know that these are flags. Because of course, the issue that entities as well as, you know, the state agencies face is to come out and definitively call something a scam or a scheme without further information does open you up to suit or something like that if you're wrong due to the reputational risk. So there is that level of care that these entities want to take before coming out and saying definitively that something is a scam. But still, it doesn't prevent all of us from issuing, as I said, those advisories, from making the relevant reports, or just sharing the information, not necessarily as a suspicious activity report, which entities are required to file with the FIU, but just general information sharing. And that is something that as the FIU, we conducted training with the entities in March of this year, and that is something that we're stressing. The fact that whatever you see, even if it's not suspicious at the time, a change in a trend, a new pattern is something that can be shared with relevant entities so that you can determine if something is amiss. Because as I said, there is that air of legitimacy. There are those reputable people that you speak about, and it can sometimes catch many people a bit off guard. And it's not that the entities don't act, sometimes they may not act swiftly enough. So I think a situation like this, although I said it is something that is that has happened before, it gives us all time to pause the entire regime, the private sector, the public sector, for us to pause and to ensure that we are a lot more proactive, that we share information in a very timely manner in order to combat these future occurrences. Because if something is legitimate and you do ask a question of the FSA, of the FIU, of the police, there's nothing wrong with that. You can continue. But then think of the other side of it, that it is not legitimate and you have not asked that question and you proceed, you then open yourselves up to major losses. So I think everything comes back to a greater partnership between the public sector and the private sector, us all being proactive and being mindful that the ways in which illicit activity occur are far more advanced and take a different look than we may be accustomed to.
All right. Now, I think this question may be better directed at the police. However, from the standpoint of the unit, when you receive information about these schemes, when they come to light, how do you conduct your investigations, and what happens to the top schemers? What happens to them afterwards?
Yes, well, as I said, it's that collaborative approach. So the police do conduct investigations as well, and the FIU would do investigations in parallel. And as I said, a big part of any of these schemes is that there's generally a multi-jurisdictional element involved. So information will be shared, requests will be made in other jurisdictions. We try as best as possible to identify the key players, because the unfortunate thing is that people are conducting business with people and they probably just have a WhatsApp name. You don't have a lot of credentials to go to on. And I think that is another red flag, because if something is amiss or if something goes wrong, what are you going to report to the police? You don't have a name, you don't probably have an address, and there's very little for the law enforcement authorities to follow up on. So as best as we can with the information that eventually comes to light is to try to follow up on that information. But the issue with financial crime is, by the time something has collapsed and everyone has packed up shop and gone, it's very difficult to trace money and try to get it back after that. But there is always still, the element of them being charged on the various pieces of legislation. You can pursue civil litigation. You may try to get restitution. So if, for example, there's a scheme and you find the big player in another jurisdiction and we are able to freeze the accounts, the issue you're going to have, you may have multiple people from multiple jurisdictions wanting to get back their share of the money. By then, the person has probably spent a lot of it. So you have 100 people trying to, let's say, split up $50. So the issue, the possibility of recovery becomes less and less the longer the scheme goes on, because you're not able to fully trace assets fast enough to ensure that they can be recovered. But of course, there are other elements. If you do identify the person and they have property, there is a civil recovery mechanism, there's the confiscation. So if they do come into assets later, to settle that. But again, as I said, the issue is it is such a big pie you may have, because so many people are involved. How many of them can really get back any money that they may have lost? But there would be those parallel investigations running by the police, by the FIU, and other law enforcement agencies.
All right. So let's speak directly to persons who were involved in Creators Alliance. All right. Speak directly to them. At this point in time, what would you advise them to do? Now, I'm looking at it from two different angles: from the persons who came in later on, who have lost money, and from the persons who were in early up, who benefited possibly significantly. What would you advise for all persons? And I know that for some persons at this point in time, there is a bit of a sense of shame in possibly coming forward, because we realize that many persons have been duped, they have been tricked, that whole view of how society is looking at them at this point in time. what would you advise for persons to do so that we can, as a nation, FIU, FSA,
Right.
police, everybody, bring this matter to some sort of resolution, so that the persons at the lower level who came in very late could maybe get back, as you said, some form of restitution?
Yes. Well, speaking in respect of this example, whatever investigations by local and regional counterparts expose, because as it is an ongoing matter. So whatever ultimately is the finding where this is concerned, it's a case where that paper trail is the critical thing. And as you said, we do appreciate that there is that element of shame, but whatever information you have, if there's a report to be made, you have to share whatever information you have with law enforcement, right? So if it's some WhatsApp name, some email addresses, because the thing is, as I said, it is not a case where you're going to walk down the street, probably find these people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and get it back. And while you may have people at the higher level who profited in inverted commas, if it's not a case that you find that they are the mind and management of the scheme, it's just a case where they were lucky enough to get money before, it's not a case where you're going to go to that person and say, give me your money to give the person lower down. But it's a case where there is going to have to be that information sharing from everyone involved, right? You're the ones with the email addresses, the phone numbers, whatever information was shared. You're going to have to share that information if law enforcement is going to have any opportunity of truly finding out everyone who is involved, of truly getting an idea of how much money may have been lost. Because people will, yes, they may theorize how many people were involved and at what level, but you really don't know the full scope unless you have some documentation. And the critical thing is that while, you may not know all the parties involved, I always tell people that you may have one critical piece of information that can lead law enforcement to find somebody who you may be able to recover from, or who is a critical part of one of these one of these schemes. So as far as possible, whatever information you have, I would encourage people to share that information with law enforcement. Email it to the FIU, email it to the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force, and all of that information will be kept confidential, because while in this discussion we are referencing one particular scheme, you would note that I do say that investigations are ongoing, and it's not a case where I can definitively make a pronouncement on it, right? I am not in a position to do so, and I will not do so, right? I have seen what has been said about the fallout and around the region, but at the same time, it would still be in that investigative stage, and I encourage people to share that information, right? It's one of those things where, yes, I do think that asking the right questions is one of our biggest safeguards, but unfortunately, this is how we learn lessons. And sometimes, and I don't want us to be bogged down in the shame, I think the next step for all of us as Vincentians is to empower ourselves by sharing that information and seeing how best we can prevent it from happening again. And if there are people to be found, to be found in the wrong, that you share your information so that can happen, right? I mean, it doesn't compare to getting back your money, obviously, but there is something to be had from holding someone accountable. So share the information, share it with the right people, not posting it on your WhatsApp, Instagram statuses. That's not really going to help anyone. That's not going to help you. And it takes us back to where we started. Come to the right people, come to the law enforcement agencies with the information, share it, and we will see how that assists in unearthing the investigation, because it is not St. Vincent and the Grenadines only, it is multi-jurisdictional. So any information that you can share would be very important.
And I especially like the point that you made about the persons who benefited, quote unquote, profited, that they should not feel guilty in a sense of coming forward with their information as well. Because while you have persons on the lower level maybe feeling ashamed, there are persons at the top level who might be feeling like did not realize how they were actually benefiting from this. I do appreciate that point that you made about coming forward as well. If you benefited and don't feel guilty about it, so that the whole situation can be unraveled. Right.
Right.
And of course, I am not so. I do appreciate that there are people who are going to just say, "Well, I was lucky, hard luck for everybody else," But we appeal to their good nature and the preventing something like this happening again. Because remember, as they say, today for me, tomorrow for you. Something wrapped in a better package may get you on the next instance. So in this instance, please let us see what we can do to improve the overall framework, especially if you were somebody encouraging many people to join as well.
All right.
All right, then. So that brings us to the end of our interview here. Roleza, you had any more questions?
All right. Well, I'll just leave it to Miss Sandy to give her final thoughts or passing words. And yeah.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you for having me this morning. And just in closing, I would like to say that whether it be what is happening now, I can definitively say, unfortunately, that this will not be the last time that we see something where people can be taken advantage of, right? Whether or not it starts out legitimately and things go bad, or it starts out illegitimately from the get-go. And it's just a stress. If it's too good to be true, it probably is, Ask the questions. You have the Financial Services Authority, you have the Financial Intelligence Unit, and you have the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force. The way that we do the due diligence and ask the questions in our everyday life, let us do it where it matters. Let us not share our personal information. Let us not share our hard-earned monies with people that we do not know and have not built up a relationship with. If it is legitimate, asking one question is not going to prevent you from profiting, right? So just ask the questions, take the time, do your due diligence, and move forward from there. But please, please, please pause and do that due diligence and ask the relevant authorities, not just somebody you view as a trusted individual. Ask the people who are empowered to license or investigate. Those are the people you should be turning to in instances such as this.
All right.
All right. Then thank you very much, Miss Sandy, for being here with us on our interview as well. Definitely hoping that this information will reach far and wide and we'll have some, much better things going forward. This brings us to the end of our interview here. We were interviewing Miss Letitia Sandy, who is the director of the Financial Intelligence Unit. We're talking about what you should know or what we should know about MLMs and pyramid schemes. So, Ms. Sandy, once again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.